in case you guys haven't seen all this, let's go ahead and start right here.
John, these are emails that show Jeffrey Epstein mentioning Donald Trump by name multiple times in private correspondence that he had with people, including Ghislaine Maxwell, obviously his longtime associate and accomplice, and also the author Michael Wolff, in a time span of about the last 15 years or so in these emails. Now, these are coming out from the House Oversight Committee. They had issued a bipartisan subpoena to Jeffrey Epstein's estate, John, as you know, earlier this year. And so they've gotten their hands on a trove of documents. And these are emails that included Jeffrey Epstein on them. They were sent either to him or from him that mentioned Donald Trump before he was in office and also while he was in office during his first term. And I want to walk you through these emails of what exactly we are reading in Jeffrey Epstein's own words in these emails that have been released by the House Oversight Committee. And in one of them, Jeffrey Epstein says, and I should note, Trump did not send or receive any of these messages. He's not a party to these emails, John, but these are emails from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. This is one from April 2nd, 2011. And in this email, Jeffrey Epstein writes to Ghislaine Maxwell and says, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. There's a name that's redacted, which the House Oversight Committee has said is a victim of Jeffrey Epstein's. Obviously, we have not been able to independently confirm that because her name is redacted from this email. But they say redacted spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc. I'm 75% there." Ghislaine Maxwell responds to that email, John, and says, quote, "I have been thinking about that." Now, there's no context for that message in this release of what we're getting. Obviously, this was a time span, and this was about 3 years after Jeffrey Epstein had accepted what is now known as that sweetheart deal.
There's Caitlin Collins talking about these latest trove of emails. Not even latest. Now, some emails that were released from Jeffrey Epstein talking about his relationship with Donald Trump. Crazy. What we saw there was information about Epstein talking to Ghislaine Maxwell, his accomplice in their child sex trafficking ring, about how Donald Trump spent hours at his house with this victim whose name was redacted. The shit is hitting the fan. There's more than just that one email. In fact, there's a few of these emails.
And there's also other emails that have been released by the committee this morning, including between Jeffrey Epstein and Michael Wolff. People will remember Michael Wolff, of course, the author who wrote a book on the inner workings of Trump's West Wing back in 2018 during his first term. He is someone who has talked at length about his own correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein, published audio recordings of those conversations between the two of them. And in another email, and this seems to be a reference to Donald Trump saying that he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club, and Jeffrey Epstein writes to Michael Wolff and says, quote, "Trump said he asked me to resign." And he adds, John, "Never a member ever. Of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop." Now, again, we don't have the context of this email, but John, that comes as in recent months, we've heard President Trump himself and the White House say that Jeffrey Epstein was kicked out of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep. And Trump himself told reporters on Air Force One that he was trying to poach women, he and Ghislaine Maxwell, from the Mar-a-Lago spa. And that was why they had such a falling out, and why he ultimately asked Jeffrey Epstein to leave the Mar-a-Lago club.
We're getting more answers on the whole dispute over how they broke up and how he was kicked out of Mar-a-Lago and apparently was never even a member in the first place. But why would you believe Jeffrey Epstein? He's a dead liar, child trafficking pedophile, right? Or maybe his best friend Donald Trump knew everything that was going on, which is also something that they mentioned in these emails, this trove of emails that, again, Caitlin Collins and CNN keep breaking down to point out and show why Donald Trump, for this many months now, has been talking about how this is a whole Democrat hoax. I bet that's what he's going to say today. But here's more.
Now, there's also a third email in here, John, and this is, again, in regards to Jeffrey Epstein and Michael Wolff. And Michael Wolff emails Jeffrey Epstein, and this is back in December 15th, 2015, so the height of the 2016 campaign, just to put that in perspective for you. And it was the day of a CNN Republican primary debate. And Michael Wolff says, quote, "I hear that CNN is planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in a scrum afterwards." And Epstein wrote, "If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?" Michael Wolff responded at length, John. I'll summarize it, but he said in regards to Trump, "I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. Now, I'll note, John, we looked at the transcript of that CNN debate from December 2015. There's no mention of Jeffrey Epstein in there. And of course, as I mentioned, Donald Trump himself is not a party to these emails. But what this shows is Jeffrey Epstein mentioning Donald Trump by name multiple times at a moment here in Washington when their relationship has come under incredibly intense scrutiny, John.
We're getting more and more and more, even up to the presidential election the first time around. That was 2015. He and Michael Wolff, that is Jeffrey Epstein, were talking about ways that they could craft or play this whole thing when or if the Epstein situation gets asked to Donald Trump at the time. Apparently it didn't, so all of their thoughts about what they could do, that Jeffrey Epstein could probably play in a certain way, didn't really make much sense for that moment. But Michael Wolff, as I've showed you guys before, has been knee deep, neck deep in all of this stuff, has many conversations with Donald Trump, knows a lot of their relationships, has many conversations and wrote books about it, also with Jeffrey Epstein. So as the things that he's releasing has been saying over years now, his credibility continues to build on what it is that he was saying and things that he spoke to Jeffrey Epstein about. One last thing here from CNN and Caitlin Collins and John Berman there.
This kind of language from Jeffrey Epstein himself, how often has Donald Trump, what has Donald Trump said about contact he may have had or time he may have allegedly spent with some of Epstein's alleged victims?
Obviously, he is referencing someone who Jeffrey Epstein says in this email from 2011 that spent time with Donald Trump at his house. And so we've asked the White House for comment on this morning. Obviously, these are emails that predate his time in office this term. They span about 15 years, this correspondence that's being released. And Trump has denied that he knew anything about what Jeffrey Epstein was doing and the sex trafficking of young women. And he said that he wasn't aware of that at the time. And obviously, Trump himself has not been accused of any wrongdoing. It's very important that we make that clear here, John. But of course, the question has been when it comes to regards to the Justice Department and what they've released about what they know. And Adelita Grijalva is being sworn in today. She's the new House Democrat from Arizona, and she's expected to be that 218th signature. And so the pressure has been building on not just Democrats, but Republicans here in Washington to release more information about what the Justice Department has. And so looking at that email, obviously, will likely only increase that pressure to do so.
That pressure, she's a building. I mean, it's been building for a while now. We saw it with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino from the very beginning of this whole cover-up, when their eyes nearly popped out of their heads when they were talking to Maria Bartiromo and they were asked about the evidence that could be coming out and the things that they're now covering up and all those issues that they said they were going to get to the bottom of. Even all the way up in Kash Patel's confirmation hearings, when he was talking about how he's going to go after the same thing. And maybe he wasn't privy to the information that Donald Trump wants him to cover up just yet. Representative Garcia showed up on MSNBC to talk about this because there has been a little bit of response from the White House.
First reaction now from the White House to the release of these emails. This statement coming from the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. I'm going to read it to you in full. The Democrats selectively leaked emails to the liberal media to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump. The unnamed victim referenced in these emails is the late Virginia Giuffre, who repeatedly said President Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing whatsoever and couldn't have been friendlier to her in their limited interactions. The fact remains that President Trump kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club decades ago for being a creep to his female employees, including Giuffre. These stories are nothing more than bad faith efforts to distract from President Trump's historic accomplishments. And any American with common sense sees right through this hoax and clear distraction from the government opening back up again. What's your response to that?
My response is simple. Then release all the files. If the president has nothing to hide, if the press secretary right there in her comments and statement, if they have nothing to hide at the White House or the Department of Justice, then all we want is for them to release the full files. It's very clear. You can't spend your entire campaign saying you're going to do something and make a commitment to the American people and then backtrack. And so we're going to ensure, one, we always are going to protect the victims and survivors. And if they want to clear the president's name, and more importantly, also all of the other men and powerful men that may have been involved, then release the files today. That should be the response from the White House.
Check out that White House defense. I believe Caroline Leavitt's the one who released that bullshit statement. Their defense is to use Virginia Giuffre, the woman who, I guess, committed suicide earlier this year after she was one of the main vocal voices against this whole thing, who also brought down Prince Andrew over there in the UK. They're going to use her as a character witness, even though she's been one talking about how horrific this whole thing was with Donald Trump's best friend, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Somehow they think they can use Virginia's name and memory as some kind of way to make them look better. Oh, even Virginia Giuffre said that Donald Trump never did anything wrong, because we're going to use her and her whole family. They were pushing back against our huge cover up of this whole thing somehow as our pawn. Look how disgusting these pieces of shit are. It illustrates clearly how they don't give a damn. How these other victims that have come forward and talked about how they want all this information released and they've ignored and called it a hoax after they've demanded that these things be released and the justice that they keep seeking becomes reality. They've been ignoring them and throwing up middle fingers at them. It's pretty obvious that they're willing to use people to no end, even the victims of this guy, to try and let this guy in the White House off the hook. That's an insult. And on top of that, the back end of that response, they're just trying to stop all of this great momentum and huge historic successes of this Trump administration. That ain't working either, because everyone sees that this is a trash administration that's destroying as many lives as possible. You can't even hide behind that lie because everyone can see the reality. Here's more from this interview with Representative Garcia.
What questions specifically do you have for the president about these emails?
Well, my questions to the president would be, first, is what was your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, did you know what was happening? He was obviously running a huge sex trafficking ring. Why are there so many cases of these connections back to Mar-a-Lago? Jeffrey Epstein himself said that Donald Trump was one of his best friends. Why would he say that? And there's so many questions to ask. And the president could right now end all of the speculation and do the right thing for the survivors by releasing the files. The president himself has said that he has done nothing wrong. Then release the files, because we know for a fact that there are many, many powerful men, some of the most powerful, wealthiest men in this country, that have done and committed harm to children and to girls and women in this country. And those women deserve justice. So it is time to end this White House cover-up and release the Epstein files today.
If these emails were selectively leaked the way that the White House expects anyone to believe, what else did they pick and choose from? How do you have that information? And if you have that information, why haven't you released it yet? As Representative Garcia keeps talking about, the lies have run out. The corners are surrounding them. You got to do and say something else now, bro. And I really hope the journalists that are in front of them will start asking them, why is it you've been lying about this then? Because now the story has to change because evidence continues to come out that shows they've been lying. I really hope they ask, why have you been lying about this for so long? Why is it that you're covering up for, I guess you can just say, these rich and powerful men that Donald Trump is covering up for, and not include Donald Trump in those rich and powerful men, even though Donald Trump said the guy who's running this whole thing for rich and powerful men was one of his best buddies. Hey, here's one of these lies. Maybe Todd Blanche should answer for this. Because as Aaron Parnas pointed out here, these emails, this is what I thought about when I read one of those emails. These emails contradict Ghislaine Maxwell's interview with Todd Blanche, who was Donald Trump's former personal attorney who lost those cases for him when he was getting, caught up in catching those cases for his criminal activity. He went on to say, she said she never saw Trump at Epstein's house in that interview that Maxwell had with Todd Blanche that was supposed to make her look better and Donald Trump take him off the hook. So if she said that he was on the up and up and never saw anyone, which is quoted here. This is from that interview with Maxwell. She says, I think they were friendly like people are in social settings. I don't think they were close friends, or I certainly never witnessed the president in I don't recall ever seeing him in his house, for instance. That doesn't make a lot of sense when it comes to what it is that we saw in these emails. From Jeffrey to Ghislaine in 2011. I want you to realize that dog hasn't barked is Trump. This victim spent hours at my house with him. He's never once been mentioned. That was to Ghislaine. Did Ghislaine not read that email? before she then went and talked to Todd Blanche about how Donald Trump was never at the house, even though she got an email from the guy whose house it is saying he's at the house for hours with the victim.